people were finalizing the translations. So
can you imagine just knowing that the king is coming to see your play, like while you're writing it, and being like, pretty sure the king's gonna come, so gotta make sure he's into this thing. So what's the king into? Demonology. I guess let's throw some witches in here. Maybe he'd be into that. It was like, really, he's playing to his audience. He's like writing this play just to please the king. Like, I don't know. Imagine if, I don't know, Joe Biden was listening to every episode of Ridiculous History. Like,
these F's scrambled somewhere.
Lest you be screaming at your podcast implement too loudly, I think my timing is a little off, but it is something that people have observed, that the King James Bible and Shakespeare have a similar tone, but the timing, to your point, Ben, isn't quite right. But clearly, what Shakespeare did, he didn't do in a vacuum. I mean, he didn't completely invent this type of speaking, this type of prose. It was out there. He was just really good at it and got really famous for it.
Well, yeah, I think the timeline is in support of that supposition, because if Shakespeare is 46 in 1610, then that means he's actively been writing, producing, and staging plays, so people are going to be aware of his language. So that's why I could see it definitely informing it, because the people doing the translation for the king are just like Shakespeare in a way. They're saying, okay, we've got one very important reader, we got a VIP reader, and we know what he likes. So let's just, nobody lie, just kind of embellish, okay? Just kind of read the room.
And to jump in here real quick, I mean, what is it, 1606? The King James Bible was written in 1611. So, I mean, we're talking 5 years difference right there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, there's definitely some alignment, but I don't want to go out on a limb and say that it was definitely like 1-to-1. But again, I think that type of speech, that type of writing of theater was not something that Shakespeare invented out of whole cloth. He was just probably the one that we think of the most. So there's a lot of, when you Google this, a lot of people make this comparison and ask this question. But he was a very important patron of Shakespeare.
And apparently he did not like the show. He was not a fan of the play. Could have been the whole murdering the king part that he was not a fan of.
It clearly wasn't him, though. This is clearly a Scottish king. Right, I mean, and there's witchcraft at work. I mean, I would have taken it as a compliment. It's like, well, only the malevolent forces of Satan himself could bring me down.
Exactly.
There's another part here too. You can find some, I think, kind of in the weeds, but fascinating inaccuracies in Macbeth that are, I'm not going to say 100% proven, but it really seems as though Shakespeare himself kind of airbrushed some stuff, took some creative license with some characters, especially if King James I was considered a descendant of the characters. This is not like the modern days where you can say, okay, Joe Biden didn't like our podcast, and so dang, he went on stage and mentioned it in a mean way and kind of a rambling, unglued address to the nation. That would be great for our numbers, actually. Back then, if the king didn't like your play, he could arrest you. He could just have you killed. You know what I mean? So big stakes. What happens? You said James doesn't like the play. Jimmy is not happy camp.
Not pleased. And apparently because of that, the show was not performed again for many, 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 many years. And it's hard to exactly pinpoint when the next performance was, but there's some sites that say that the next time it was performed was actually not in England, but was performed in Amsterdam and in 1672. Oh. And that production also had some mishaps, some problems, where apparently the actor who was playing Macbeth was having an affair with the wife of the actor playing Duncan, and then chose to actually bring a real dagger on stage and murder Duncan for real.
What?
During the performance.
Dude, this is so funny. There's an episode of LA Law, or maybe not LA Law, maybe Law and Order. Are you familiar with the long-running New York interactive play, Sleep No More?
Yes.
It's fabulous, and it is loosely tied to Macbeth, the actual action that takes place when you're in this. I could only maybe describe it as like an interactive, psychedelic, haunted house.
Immersive theater.
Very
finest.
cool. One of the coolest things I've ever experienced in my life. But there is an episode. So you're walking around. You've got these masks on. You're in the same space as the players, and it's a 3D space. You're walking upstairs, and you kind of chase whoever interests you. You kind of follow them around and get distracted. And it's sort of like being on a video game or something. It's fabulous. But it does end in like the banquet scene from Macbeth. Isn't that in Macbeth? Yeah, there's a banquet scene with like. There's also some King Lear elements. The point is, there's an episode of Law and Order. This play's been running that long. This immersive thing, probably since the 90s, where it's a thing like that, but it's not exactly that. But the twist is that someone actually kills the person for real in it, and then the Sam Waterston and his crew have to solve the crime. I just thought that was a funny connection. But yeah, what an interesting. Like, it's been used as a trope in other, pop cultural kind of things. It was actually a thing in Station 11, which had a play within a play. But the idea of killing someone for real in a play where no one's expecting that to happen and the props can look a lot like real weapons,
Yeah, it's not the best way to go about murdering someone. I feel like maybe do it after the show when there's not an audience full of people, witnesses.
Yeah, and then like where are your understudies at? Again, it's a production question too, ethics aside. But the
prop master, kind of a situation.
This is weird to me because there's already we're seeing a work of historical fiction, is what we call it today, but we're seeing it interact with real world consequences. And there's a lot you can read into it if you are someone in the 1600s watching this, and you see, like, I had to play, what's the guy's name? Banquo or something. Banquo, I had to play. And they have lines where it's like, and oftentimes to win us to our harm, the instruments of darkness tell us truths, win us with honest trifles, to betray in deepest consequence. Basically, they're saying, a good way to lie to people is to kind of tell them the truth. Centuries later, Emily Dickinson will say, tell the truth, but tell it slant, and things like that. So I can see audience members already very sensitive to this play between fiction and fact. And I bring this up because imagining seeing someone actually get fatally stabbed in front of, like, you would wonder whether it was on purpose. You might even, I would not be surprised if several people in the theater, several, like, maybe folks who weren't quite groundling level, weren't too close to the stage, I'd be surprised if at least a few of them didn't turn to each other and say, man, that guy can act. That is commitment,
The special effects in this production are incredible.
Yes, I love it. And this is just one strange and disturbing incident, right? Like you said, this is kind of dogged the Scottish business, my new favorite phrase now, the Scottish business for a while.
Yeah, that was the next horrible, tragedy that befell a production. You would think at some point, theater companies would be like, we're not doing this play anymore. People keep dying, but they keep going. So I think the next time that it was performed possibly in London, was a company called the Duke's Men. You gotta hit that liquid U when you say Duke, It's in Duke pukes. Duke doesn't pook. That's what they would say.
I prefer to even just like go all the way and just combine it and call it the Dukesman.
The Dukes.
The Dukesman.
So they were a company. They were licensed by Charles II to perform Macbeth at the time, and they were. This is early 1670s. It came to the big duel of Macbeth and Macduff, and there was an accident where the actor named Henry Harris accidentally ran his sword through the eye of the actor playing Macbeth, killing him. Which, can you imagine being in the audience for that?
Yeah, no.
Horror
Imagine
show?
being the guy, Either one of them. I would feel terrible. Again, whether I've been run through the eye or I run through someone's eye by accident. A really quick housekeeping question. You say licensed by Charles II. Was the king at this point just the keeper of all intellectual property? Like, you had to get license or leave from the king to perform a play?
Yeah, I'm imagining, King's men going around being like, "Oi there! Like, this is an unlicensed Shakespeare show. Break it up! No, where's your,
nothing to see here." Yeah,
I can see that. Yeah, I agree with you guys. Like the idea. Okay, you can see someone appear to be stabbed in the torso on stage, and it can look very believable, right? So even then you could say, hey, maybe that was a prop or whatever, but eyeballs are a lot harder to pull off realistically, even in the modern days. So this was clearly a fatal accident. And, I have to ask, do you think, and even if we're just speculating here, it's a good question, do you think this macabre series of accidents and homicides would have made the play less popular for the public, or would it have been more compelling? Like, would it have put more butts in seats? The idea that it was dangerous.
So it's a big marketing scheme.
I mean, it's a marketing scheme. I mean, maybe they cursed the play themselves, right? No, I have to say, I mean, I have always found this to be one of the more interesting and grabby Shakespeare plays. I like witchy stuff. I think we all do. I like Murder Most Foul, all that. I think the Lady Macbeth character is interesting. I like madness, I think that's why it's sort of persevered. It's also been adapted, I think, so a good bit more for screen than any other Shakespeare play that I can think of. Not to mention, like, the very elaborate, like the Sleep No More thing, it's been running for ages, and various adaptations of it, because how you portray the witches is always interesting. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen the new Cohen Shakespeare, but the woman who plays the witches, Catherine Hunter, freaking fantastic. Like, contorting her body and literally playing, like, all three, and, like, are they in her head? Are there three of them? No, sometimes they're just a reflection, and it's just so cool. It's very, like, Bergman-esque, the whole production of that film. So, I don't know.
I mean, it's no Titus Andronicus, but it slaps. I love the meditation. Oh, I love the film adaptation of that by Julie Taymor. It's like, I think one of her only films. She did a really kind of, by my understanding, pretty bad Beatles movie called Across the Universe. She's also famous for, like, completely running that Spider-Man musical into the ground. Turn Off the Dark. That was her. And also she's famous in a positive way for The Lion King. She did all the production design for that. But Titus is a really cool Shakespeare adaptation as well.
There's something about Titus where it's like on average, like every 27 lines, either a limb is hacked off or somebody dies.
Oh, it's gnarly.
The bloodiest of bloody plays.
See, they say the guy doesn't have range. I'm kidding. People don't say that about William Shakespeare.
I guess, no, I think those are both interesting points, because I think maybe that's why Macbeth occupies this, like, middle ground between his, like, lighter work and more depressing work and stuff like Titus, which is just too much, because it's got all of the chops of Titus, literally, maybe not quite as many chops, but it's got, like, a lot of the same drama and grotesqueness, but it's a little more palatable.
Yeah, I mean, I think Titus was, if I recall correctly, Shakespeare's first tragedy. There's the historians agree, yeah, like 15 something, and like 1580. So by the time he gets to Macbeth, he's learned a little bit more about the art of subtlety. And he's like, hey, maybe you can earn death or dismemberment as a slow burn, right?
Right. Maybe we don't cook the children into a pie and feed it to their mother. Sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, I think we passed the statute of limitations for spoilers on that one.
Yeah. So people still keep making Macbeth, and I think we're going to get to an interesting question about just how cursed it may be. But to do that, we should probably walk through a few more incidents, because it wasn't always actors stabbing each other, whether out of anger or whether out of accident, right?
Hey, it's Nolan Ben, the host of Ridiculous History. Every week you get to hear from us, and now there's a brand new way for us to hear from you.
That's right. Thanks to new Talkback feature on the free iHeart app, you can send us a voice message with one tap. It's that easy.
Simply tap the red microphone on the full screen player to send us a voice message. Let us know what you thought about this week's episode. Ask ask and answer questions from episodes.
Yeah, you can comment on topics from Ridiculous History, or you can just say hi and let us know where you're listening to the show. It's easy, right?
Oh yeah, talk to us now with one tap on the free iHeart app. Discover music, radio, and podcasts you'll love.
Right. There was one in 1703 where a Category 2 hurricane struck England and caused a ton of damage, millions of pounds worth of damage, and killed 1,500 seamen right as the play was opening. So that was one from the gods.
Wow, that is $3,000. Just to point that out.
We gotta go collect them.
Yeah. So natural forces are conspiring against people saying the M word.
Right.
And then what about when the plague has already gone international in Europe? What about when it crosses the pond? Because we know that the U.S., since its inception, also loved Shakespeare. Pretty much everybody agreed this guy was thought of as the best author in the language of all time. He's the GOAT.
That's right. Well, the famous Astor Place riots, which I feel like could have its own episode because we did it. But you did it. Yeah. So let's go back to the Astor Place riots episode. And
Pretty recently, actually.
but that, so that was two warring actors, the great Edwin Forrest and then Charles Macready, which I always think the other one's the British one because Edwin Forrest sounds like such a British name, and Charles Macready sounds like a real American name, but it's the opposite.
Mr. Macready. What's that from? Mr. Macready. I know what it is. I think it's from Dark City. Is there a character named Mr. Macready? I think Dark City is amazing. I love it. Such a good movie. Please. Yeah, this one really escalates quickly. I mean, it gets unnecessarily violent, for like a riot springing from a public performance of a freaking play.
Yeah, it wasn't really so much about the play in the Astor Place riots. It was just they so happened to be both performing Macbeth, but it was more about just like using this event as an excuse to start a riot. I feel like.
Yeah, and again, that episode walks through some of the context there, but there is a real death toll. People are dead, many more are wounded, many more have some sort of injury. It's not what you associate with a night at the theater, unless you know about the curse of Macbeth.
Did you talk at all about the supposed hissing that they were doing to each other, back and forth, Macready and
I think so.
Forrest?
Yeah, there was definitely some real venom there.
They were going back. They were going to each other's productions, and then when one of them would pause, the other would be like,
They heckled each other.
Great. But yeah, there was a riot that ensued, and police were dispersed and ended up firing into a crowd, and I believe around 24 people or so were killed.
Insane. And now we're getting to like modern history even. So it's weird when we talk about Macready and Forrest because they are not immortalized on film, right? So unless you saw their performances in real time, you would be reading reviews. So they maybe don't have the same staying power for a lot of people that actors do once photography and once film go mainstream. And that's where we see that the curse of Macbeth continues to actors that you may know of today, folks. You may have seen their work.
right. I mean, I'd say Laurence Olivier may be the most famous Shakespearean actor of all time, and Olivier did a performance or production at the Old Vic in 1937, and he was preparing to play Macbeth for the first time, and the director and I think the woman who was playing Lady Macduff were in a car accident on the way to the theater. 2 days later, the dog belonging to the Old Vic's founder was run over by a car. So even dogs aren't safe from this curse. Even the theater pets. Cool. And then Olivier was apparently so distraught by all of this that he lost his voice and couldn't speak, and that caused the opening to be postponed. And then 3 days after the show was opening, the director was replaced. There's this fraught with horrible things. That 25-pound stage weight apparently crashed down from the flies, barely missing Sir Lawrence Olivier's head by inches.
That's the stuff. That's the stuff of theater chaos right there. You know, sandbags, willy-nilly, Phantom of the Opera type stuff right there.
Exactly. And then also, the woman who was playing, I believe Lady Macbeth, died of a heart attack just before dress rehearsal. And then the next time the Old Vic produced that show, the portrait of the actress, whose last name was Bayliss, that was hung in the theater, it fell from the wall on opening night.
And so in the realm of the folklore we're exploring, then the logic of this curse would be that these disasters don't occur for every production of the Scottish business. They occur when someone, anyone in the theater, whether actor, crew, or civilian, says Macbeth in the room, right? In the building.
It's okay to say it if you're performing the piece, if you're doing the play, because obviously you have to say it a number of times, and if every time you said it you had to go outside, spin around, spit, cuss, and knock on the door and ask for permission, really slow down the rehearsal process. But I think the performance of the play in general is you're undertaking, you're undergoing a cursed project, a cursed script. So the accompanying superstition is remnants from all of these productions throughout history that have led to death and accidents and horrible.
That's what I was going to ask. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean it's only triggered by someone saying it out loud. I guess what if it's it's in the course of doing the play? You're going to say the name. So it's basically the whole implication is that the play itself is cursed, should never be performed, and his name should not be spoken in the hallowed halls of the theater.
Has there ever been an adaptation where they just say the M word every time they're going to say that? Like they literally just say the M word. I would watch it.
We should do that one. The first non-cursed production of.
But would they get confusing because you got Macduff, you got Lady Macbeth as well? Do they have to have different distinctions for each of those?
Different sound effects. You know, Macbeth is like a and like Macduff is like a. That's too confusing. It should be more different than that. Maybe like a. It's too long. We can workshop this. I like the idea though.
Yeah, I like if we did the M word. I don't want to overcomplicate this, but then for like, hey, let's go with your idea for cool sound effects. You know, like a ear is great, and then maybe a yowza. I just want to hear people say yowza instead of the name.
Or a Wilhelm scream. You know, for Lady Macbeth.
Yeah, my lord.
Wow,
I would go to that. I would go to that. And the question would be if they did it consistently, how long would it take for it to not be funny anymore and for you just to be like invested back in the drama of the play?
I can tell you from
It would either be like instantly or never.
I can tell you from experience. It's a 2-hour, 20-something minute production with a 15-minute intermission. So maybe the best way to do it would be to slowly beat your maximum, slowly escalate shit until at the end it's absurdist. You know what I mean? And you're just noticing people by the way that they're dressed and the sound effect. Like it's cacophonous. You know, I love that.
Yeah, no, the sound design would need to evolve. I am with you. That it will evolve with the rising action of the play. I like this idea. Let's do it. The first Ridiculous History production of what?
Oh god, I have out of time this.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Max. That's you also have to play one of the characters. So we're just gonna.
How do you do this to me?
I love this spin-off idea of ridiculous theater. That's it.
Yes. Well,
And then last thing, there could be a McDonald's tie-in, and one of the characters could just be like, there could be McChicken, there could be, McCafe.
Oh yeah. I got you guys. We've talked about this before, but like, finally explore like what happened to Ronald McDonald.
yes, I've got it.
Guy.
I did the research. I've got this one for next future episode.
I want to try something. Will, do you know what Grimace is?
Yeah, of course. Oh, what species?
Yeah. What is he? An anthropomorphic version of?
Oh, reason. That
I
can't
would
be
have
right.
said uvula, perhaps, or some a misshapen grape. But yeah,
Colorblind. I thought he was a Sasquatch.
there you go. He could have been nice. Purple. He's purple as hell. Max, blow our minds.
Yeah.
He is a taste bud.
What? Hit the sound cue. They had so many other things they went past before they got the taste bud. They could have said like, so someone pitched tongue, and someone else said, no, it's too much, too general, too sensual.
You gotta go more specific.
Yeah. They probably called him Taste Buddy at first. It's right here. Why call
He's
him
also huge. He's like the biggest of all of them. He's massive.
Well, I think that we are helping McDonald's here. We're presenting some clear business opportunities. The M word is going to be a hit. Look for it at a theater near you. But give us some time. Give us some time in the writer's room.
Before we wrap up, though, I've got to get to the present day. I mean, there's some really good ones leading up to a massive pop cultural phenomenon that happened not 3 months ago.
That's right. That was the reason why it was on my mind. But just to fly through some of the more recent ones, I love the one about Charlton Heston, who his tights were soaked in kerosene and his tights caught on fire during the performance. It's like he had burns all over his groin and legs, which is damn tights. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow.
Great. He has a good point. Odd casting choice. Like, talk about a scenery chore and a very specific delivery, you know?
And then we also had Alec Baldwin in a production in 1998. He sliced open the hand of the actor playing Macbeth. And
Shoot him in the face.
I was gonna say it's a sad, it's a sad
looking.
series that we're seeing from Alec Baldwin.
I don't mean to make light. It is a terrible thing, but it's like, God, yeah.
I made a joke about sailor thumbs. I mean, what's the statute of limitations? There's also this was interesting. I don't know a lot about modern celebrities because different philosophical ideological reasons, but I was really interested that you pointed out in some of the research, Will, that this came up during the the Academy Awards.
That's right. I was watching the Oscars, which was going fine, just a normal Oscars, and then something happened, and what I noticed was Chris Rock was on stage and he said, "Quote, Denzel, Macbeth, loved it." And then right after he said that, I was like, "Ooh, shouldn't have said that. Shouldn't have said that. You're in the theater, Chris. Ooh, that's bad luck. Shouldn't have said that."
Went a little nuts too. All the theater nerds took to Twitter and were like,
Oh, and then moments later, Will Smith was possessed by the ghost of a witch and slapped Chris Rock in the face.
unprecedented.
And then later, one quite prestigious award. I don't know if you want to say prestigious or prestigious. I just feel like prestigious sounds fancier than necessarily.
Yeah, it's like the thespian question. You're talking about the mayonnaise. It's definitely Dukes. Oh yeah, Dukes. English royalty, gentry, landed gentry are Dukes.
But I was like, "Would you like some deal on your sandwich or ham sandwich?"
Like you're a spy. He's a spy.
Out here, city slicker.
I found him. Who are you working for? So there was another one, and I think it's neat looking at this, the one we're wrapping up with, because as you foreshadowed just a second ago, Will, there is a reason, a very specific reason that Macbeth was on your mind. So perhaps we were incorrect when we thought this guy's just had this locked and loaded for years. You know, what brought this story to the forefront of your mind when we asked about cool stories from history?
I mean, he was mainly the Chris Rock situation that was still rattling around in my head, but then also Daniel Craig is doing a production on Broadway, and I mean, I feel like this is going to be more common and not just productions of Macbeth, but they had to cancel some preview performances because multiple people tested positive for COVID-19, which is the new curse of theater and live events.
Glad we had a golden little moment where everything felt kind of normal again, and now it's like, God, everyone's getting that all over again.
just
Thankfully, it
canceled
seems like the
our,
cases are mild.
Office party, our goodbye office party, because of COVID. It's hitting everybody equally, but also
And obviously because of Macbeth.
obviously because someone said Macbeth in the studio years ago. I blame Jonathan Strickland, aka the Twister, but we do want to, lest we do a disservice to very skeptical people in the crowd, we do have to point out methodology here. There have been many productions of Scottish business over the centuries, and you're not near as likely to hear about the ones where things went off without a hitch. Will and Noel and Max and I are well aware of this, but it's happened often enough that people really do believe this superstition. They really do believe that just maybe that curse from like the 1600s is still around today, right?
I got one question, Ben. The production that you were in, did anything wonky happen, or did anybody get hurt?
Emotionally, oh yeah, bloodbath. But that's a great question. So we did have a couple of people who dropped out. We had one person who could no longer be in the production because they got arrested. Unrelated, I think, to the play, but if people really believe in this curse or this superstition, then maybe that would be something we could point to. I'll just tell you, it's still, I have massive respect for Shakespearean actors. I wouldn't consider myself one of those. I have massive respect for anybody involved with staging a production of Shakespeare, because those things are intense, they're long, and you really have to make sure that it's relatable. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've never done a production of Macbeth. I would love to. Hopefully it goes well. I have been injured once, though, during a Shakespeare play. It was a Midsummer Night's Dream, and I was stabbed in the throat. The back of my throat was punctured with a fake flower that had a point, like a metal piece of
Twisties. We're doing twisties.
Yeah, flower kind of. Thanks. But it was like literally in the middle of this first big hug scene, and I always put this flower in my mouth, and for some reason, one of the buds had fallen off, and the wire stabbed me and punctured the back of my throat, and I had to continue doing the play, and I had a mouthful of blood, and I was.
Holy cow. Mouthful of Blood is the name of something. That's a song.
Yeah, it is.
I think it exists.
It does exist.
It's like smiling through a mouthful of blood, or laughing with a mouthful. I can't remember. It's some god thing. I have a theory. Not a theory. It's just a theory with respect to the version of Macbeth that I have the most fond memories of, which is the Sleep No More thing I talked about. There is no dialogue in this version of Macbeth at all. It's just pantomime, and dance and stuff. It's all the action. You're aware of it from being familiar with the play, but they don't speak. So no wonder it had such a long and illustrious run. And they shut it down for COVID, but it is back. The company's called Punch Drunk, I think, that does it. And they do some other kind of immersive theater things, and I just can't speak highly enough of it. If you're in New York, and it's a little pricey, but absolutely worth your time. It's like the coolest, most artsy haunted house that you'll ever set foot in. It's a 4.5-hour experience, and the time just zips by.
It's well worth it. Yeah, I have a question for you, Will. This is probably going to be on the mind of a lot of our fellow listeners today. Does the Macbeth curse apply specifically to the show Macbeth, or is it just verboten to say the N-word for any production? Like, have people die during West Side Story because someone with an axe to grind ran in and was like, Macbeth, and then ran back out.
So I think if you get more granular with it, I'm sure every thespian out there has some story to share about somebody saying it in the theater and then something going horribly awry. It does echo out and it reverberates out into any production, anything happening in the theater. If you are to utter the name of that play, that character, and not cleanse yourself, you are opening yourselves up to the curse. Or actors are just clumsy and uncoordinated.
Okay.
yeah, you can listen to my podcast, #Storytime, wherever you get your podcasts, and definitely check out this season because, as we mentioned at the top, Ben's on it, Noel's on it, Annie Reese, Lauren Vogelbaum, Mike Johns, a lot of great stories on there. And then I'm a huge theater lover, and I live in LA, and I'm always trying to involve myself in different productions out here, whether they want me or not. But I recently participated in a short play festival called the Brisk Festival. And I wrote and directed a short play called The Mating Ritual of Snails. And it won Best Play, and I won Best Director. So
that's awesome. Is it just a bunch of snails just kind of grinding against each other in slow motion, like in Microcosmos?
More or less. It's about two snails meeting and going through their very interesting, unique mating process.
Do you know what I'm referring to?
No.
The film Microcosmos, like a French nature documentary thing. It's the same people who did Winged Migration. So it was like a very early kind of high art kind of nature documentary. And there's one sequence where it's just these two snails just grinding their torsos against each other. It looks like a thing that you can probably picture. And there's gorgeous opera aria playing in the background. And it's the most hilarious and erotic thing that I've ever seen. And it's a kid's movie. You've probably seen the cover of it. They didn't market it very well back when Blockbuster was a thing. It's like a grasshopper wearing sunglasses on the cover. It's called Microcosmos. So it's actually a artsy kind of French super micro kind of like nature documentary about bugs and snails and
I'm gonna get into that this weekend. But yeah, snails, they make love for 12 hours.
Yeah, I mean, that's where Sting
Yeah, that's sort of the sting of the animal.
Yes. Hilarious and erotic. I had a few exes who described it that way. One better way to end things. Well, thank you so much. Do check out Storytime. Not just the episodes Noel and I are on, though we hope you enjoy those as well, of course. Thanks, as always, to our own Kenneth Rock, the one and only Mr. Max Williams. Max, thanks for classing up the show. Quick kiss to the sky from Max. Thanks also to Alex Williams, who composed this amazing soundtrack, playing us out. Thank you to you. I haven't said this on air, man. I'm still trying to convince you to take an improv class with me. I think we would have so much fun.
Oh, dude, after this next COVID wave, I was super down. It's something that always terrified me in a previous life, but now I'm like, you know what, why not? You only live once unless you fly out through the eye during improv. That could happen. Someone could point wildly, and actually go too far and just jam you right in the eyeball or the throat. Lots of dangerous things can happen in the theater, but you know what? It's all for love of the craft.
I'll fly out for this improv class.
Hey, all right, let's do it. It's settled. We'll see you next time, folks. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Hey, it's no longer about ridiculous history. Every week you get to hear from us. And now there's a brand new way for us to hear from you.
That's right. Thanks to the new TalkBack feature on the free iHeart app, you can send us a voice message with one tap. It's that easy.
Simply tap the red microphone on the full screen player to send us a voice message. Let us know what you thought about this week's episode. Ask and answer questions from episodes.
Yeah, you can comment on topics from ridiculous history, or you can just say hi. Let us know where you're listening to this show. It's easy, right?
Oh yeah. Talk to us now with one tap on the free iHeart app. Discover music, radio, and podcasts you'll love.
Welcome to the R&B Money Podcast, the authority on all things R&B. I'm your host, singer, songwriter, Tank. And I'm your other host, singer, songwriter, and music executive, Jay Valentine. Join us every week as we have a variety of special guests like Jamie Foxx, Eric Benet, Brooke Valentine, and many more to discuss the past, present state, and future of R&B. Listen to the R&B Money Podcast, the authority on all things R&B, premiering June 1st on the Black Effect Podcast Network, iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
some having second thoughts. When you sign the paper, you realize this is a commitment. You're gonna have to live with this man for the rest of your life.
Not only that, they're gonna write fake stories about you like they do about him. The New York Post wrote a fake story about him today. About his real estate holdings. They're inaccurate about the amount and also even about the locations in which he owns homes. In cyberspace, right? No, real homes. Actual homes. Yeah, they're like ratting them out. On their houses, he made it stuff out. Hampton spread. Fake news, kids. Sorry. But the thing is, it's like real estate people, there's a lot of dirty business in real estate. When a famous person buys a house, they sell the data. Someone does it, whether it's someone who works in the office or what have you. They'll be weaselly with it. Is that data public? Like, all the houses you get? Like, a lot of times famous folks will put a house in under an LLC so that they hide it, but then when it gets leaked, so generally speaking, it's someone from the real estate office leaked it, because they can get paid, like there's websites that will pay you. So say if, Elon buys a house, and he tries to keep it all hush-hush and under the table. Like, there was a time where they were trying to say that he is living in someone's house, and he's lying about living in this tiny house. It's not true, right? You and I know it's not true. Yeah. But they were trying to pretend that he was staying in this opulent house on Lake Austin just because he had been there before. He actually lives at my house. Nice. With Tim Dillon? With Tim Dillon. Nice. That's a great odd couple show. I probably shouldn't mention this because that would be a wonderful sitcom. You, Tim Dillon, and Elon Musk in the house. Guys, what are we doing? We're getting eggs and pancakes?
What did he say? He said he was comparing like a Saudi prince with Elon Musk, and like there's trade-offs between the positives and the negatives. He was saying something positive about Elon, that he's working on rockets, but the negative is that he likes Austin. And then comparing to the Saudi prince, that I think like jet skis or something like that, that's a positive. It's corrupt, that's the negative.
Tim Dillon is one of my favorite people. Yeah, I'm so happy he's around. I'm so happy. It's just like, that guy makes me laugh so hard. It's just his take on stuff, just rants. Ben, when they're just sitting there next to each other, and he's just talking shit. And I love when he wears the cop glasses, like the aviators. Yeah, it's almost like he's on a drug when he has those on. Yeah, like he's in a fog. I don't even see him.
Yeah, he's channeling something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in reality, the Tim Dillon thing was real. It was April 1st, but yeah, I think my world, my family's world, and I think the world in general somehow fundamentally changed on February 24th this year when Russia invaded Ukraine. I think, I have a lot of thoughts about it. I've been talking to a lot of people about it. I have family in both countries. I come from both countries. And first and foremost, it made me realize that a global hot war is within the possibility for this century. Not so far from World War III outbreak. And the reason that I realized this is because of the behavior of the United States in response to this humanitarian crisis, and the response of China that's currently quietly watching, for the most part, supporting Putin and Russia. India, for the most part, is supporting Putin and Russia. And so you have this division in the world. Just look at the population, the large economies, the large military forces, nuclear powers are just watching this conflict, watching this humanitarian crisis, and nobody seems to be shy about escalation. Nobody seems to be shy about mentioning, the word nuclear. And it just feels like what I've read recently, the rise and fall of the right by William Shire, is a journal there for the rise of the Nazi Party and you just have to know yourself, say 100 years back, 1922, nobody would predict World War II. In fact, everybody would be sure that World War II would never happen. Surely there will never be another World War. We're sitting there in the 1920s, and at the same time, time, you have Hitler, young Hitler. What is it? 1919 maybe. He is employee number 7 of the Nazi Party. So he's the 7th person to join the National Socialist German Workers' Party that ended up being one of the most consequential parties ever, political parties ever. So from a party of 7 people 20 years later, you have a party that's threatening the existence of human civilization and nuclear weapons. That would be the case. In the span of 20 years, that happened. Now we're sitting here in 2022. The possibility of nuclear war seems to be by instance, and the possibility of hot war is not that distant. And there's escalation. There's a lot that going on. And at the same time, just the humanitarian crisis. I mean, on a personal level, it's the biggest humanitarian crisis. 6 or 7 million people, refugees, 8 million people inside Ukraine. It's the biggest one since World War II. So that's one perspective. There's this authoritarian motivated sovereign land and laid claim on it. That's what I recently talked to President during Stalin. I had to recommend people to be after Stalin. And the other was Oliver Stone. He talked to the president about JFK. He also interviewed. So Oliver Stone's perspective is, look, first of all, America throughout its history has blood in its hands. NATO is pressuring its expansion, pressuring Putin, pressuring the other non-NATO regimes. And so there's some responsibility for this. And if you look at 9/11 reports, Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, Syria, the number of refugees there, the number of people displaced from their homes is close to 40 million people. 40 million people. And the number of dead is over 1 million people. And those are wars either started or catalyzed or propped up by the United States. That's the Oliver Stone perspective. You know, this idea that the United States is the good guys is a complicated one. And so he has been, starting from the Vietnam War, critic of the military-industrial complex and this kind of imperial imperative of the United States. That's that perspective. Then you have Stephen Hodgkin, you have just the Western perspective. It's like, no, yeah, America has blood in its hands, but you can't do this moral, there's no moral equivalence here. There is good guys and bad guys in the world. The good guys are flawed, yes, but the reality is Putin's Russia is an authoritarian regime, no respect for freedoms of all kinds, including freedom of the press and freedom of speech. There's a lot of basic violation of human rights, and there's just a straight-up invasion of a sovereign land, and that's a war crime, and Putin is a war criminal. And I'm much closer to that perspective, but it's not factual, it's more emotional, because I just see how much pain there is in that place. I've been listening to a lot of people crying, angry, afraid. For me, there's been just so much personal emotion. It's this idea that we're all one people, we're all one humanity has been challenged for me personally. I know there's a lot of suffering in the world, I know there's a lot of atrocities in the world, but for me it's just because I know directly people. It's like, there's been recently a couple of shootings. There's been a shooting yesterday in the United States. It's different when you have nothing to do with the people than you directly know the people.
Yeah, the shooting's an hour and a half away.
Texas, yeah. And that's, I don't know, 20 children or something like that. Yeah, it's an atrocity. But it's closer to us, and that's why we, as Americans, we feel it intimately. Just imagine that on another side of the world where you can feel it intimately because you know the people.
Well, I mean, I guess we think of it as differently because what Putin is trying to do is command resources and control a country that used to be a part of the Soviet Union. And what happened yesterday is just beyond beyond explanation. Right? It's just a completely fucked up situation where a sick person got a hold of a bunch of guns and decided to go kill kids. And it happens in this country, like every now and then. It's like, how do you stop that? No one knows how to stop that. What's the answer? Is the answer take everyone's guns? Well, they're not going to give their guns up. So it's you're going to have only criminals that have guns. It's like, it's not going to be a good situation. And is the answer make schools these armored compounds where you have armed guards outside of every school dressed like it's a military? Well, that's not something we want either. But what do you do to protect the children? And how many dollars is that going to cost? Like, do we even have the money to do that? Like, but the Oliver Stone perspective, when you're talking about the difference between the way we look at the rest of the world versus the way we look at our own actions, when you start bringing in Yemen is one that I've had Dave Smith on the podcast multiple times when he talks about it. Dave is very, very well read about Yemen, and it's a horrific scenario because no one cares, and it seems to me like not only no one cares. I mean, in the United States, this is not something that gets mainstream media attention on a daily basis, but the bombings are ongoing. Like we put up a chart once when they talked about the bombings that are happening in Ukraine versus the bombings that are currently happening in Yemen, and bombings that the United States is doing. It's wild because it's like swept under the rug. We don't think about it, and we don't even understand why we're doing it. Like I guarantee you, if you just polled a random 1,000 people and say, what are we doing in Yemen? No one would have any idea. You'd have to have someone who really gets into the sort of esoteric details of like what is going on politically, what is going on economically. Someone like Dave Smith even might struggle with the full explanation of what our motivation, not our, the military's motivation is to do this. But it's happening, and because it's not getting any attention, it's allowed to happen without scrutiny. It's allowed to happen without real mainstream criticism. If you comb, the television news sources, cable, left and right, you're not going to find discussions of Yemen on a daily basis. But that is the one. If there's an area where we can't have that moral high ground, where we say, well, what about you? Like, why do we have those? Wouldn't it be better if the United States didn't have any of those that are unjustifiable? Where you could say, oh, the United States did this in Vietnam. Yes, we did, but it was in the 1970s. Well, that would be ideal in terms of like an example of learning and growing.
Well, so that's the Oliver Stone perspective.
Yeah.
The thing is, if you look at the details, a fundamental difference between what Vladimir Putin is doing and what the United States is doing. Now, everybody's a victim of somebody's propaganda. Now, I talked to Russians, which is a very interesting thing. Both Russians and Ukrainians say that they are not at all under the influence of propaganda. Russians believe there's no propaganda in Russia. And Ukrainians believe there's no propaganda in Ukraine. That's the Russians think that the West is influenced by their propaganda, by the CNN and the Foxes, and Ukraine is influenced by their propaganda, by the limited number of news channels they have that are state-controlled. Okay? From our Western perspective, that seems ridiculous, because it's obvious that Russia's under influence of propaganda, and so it's hard to know what is true or not. But the reality seems to be that Russia is currently an authoritarian regime that tries to appear as much as possible as a democracy, because there is an election, and there's an extra hard truth on top of that. I don't know what to do with it, but Putin is still, and even more so, popular in Russia. He's very popular in India, in China, and in Russia, and some small countries around the former Soviet Union. What do you do with that? That's real objective, well, as far as we can tell, data from outside of Russia, taken from outside of Russia.
Do you give any credence to the rumors that he has cancer?
I'm not an investigator, because there's a lot of sort of rumors of this nature.
Oliver Stone even discussed it. He said,
Yeah, I agree.
while he was there.
Yeah, very nonchalant. And I thought that was a known fact, and then later I looked, and it was, I'm not sure that was objectively publicly known. My follower said that perhaps there's some truth to it.
He stayed there for quite a while. He was interviewing Putin.
Yeah, 2 years. No, he visited multiple times.
Yeah.
He spent time with him. Yeah, but according to Oliver Hewitt, he beat it. He beat the cancer. But, he's 69 years old.
Beating the cancer when Oliver was there versus what he got now.
Oh, what do you know?
Yeah, because he looks like puppy, which is oftentimes, we were talking about this with Krista Stefano podcast. I had a friend who had gout. They gave him prednisone. And he had something else too. Sarcoidosis. They gave him prednisone, and he's like, his face got big.
Yeah.
It's just like he looked puffy. He said it's just a side effect of the steroids. Yeah, his face is puffy, Yeah, Oliver Stone says Vladimir Putin has struggled with cancer during his time in which the filmmaker focused on his work on the Russian president, pictured about Putin waves during the Victory Day parade. That's where May 9th. Yeah.
Well, I'm much less concerned about the puffiness of his face and more concerned about what's going on with his mind. It seems like he's a different man now than he was even a year ago. So this is what Oliver Stone commented on, and I agree. He's formed a much stricter information bubble around him. There's that isolation that a lot of us have experienced through COVID. I honestly think it might have just isolation due to COVID. The basic distance you have to keep yourself as a leader. You have to have extra precautions, especially a political leader with assassinated senators. Yes. Well, yeah, there's that too. Well, no, but that was always the case. That has less to do with COVID.
But don't you think that increases his paranoia?
So yes, paranoia. Yeah, paranoia is the thing. That's what gets dictators. That's what gets you start mistrusting everybody, not just on the outside of the circle, but the inner circle. And so you don't know who to trust, even though the closest advisor, you don't know who to trust. And so your flow of information is really flawed.
Yeah.
It's very limited.
Yeah.
And so you start making really poor decisions, even more so than before. And that's where, if you, and I hate thinking of it that way, because to me, the war in Ukraine is a humanitarian thing, not a geopolitics thing. But if you think geopolitically, invading Ukraine was just a giant miscalculation on Putin's part on every level, geopolitical, social, militarily.
Hello, how are you okay,
Unless there's very few scenarios in which this was calculated all along. The only scenarios of Putin thought through, first of all, maybe he thought that Zelensky would just back down, would just crumble under the pressure of even a minor invasion. And obviously, you have to give credit. This is really important. So, Ukraine got its independence for the first time in many centuries in 1991, 30 years ago, when the Soviet Union collapsed. So they're dealing with independence, with sovereignty, which is a difficult process, as the United States knows. We had a civil war about it. The same thing in Ukraine. There's faction. There's a lot of corruption. The second most corrupt country in Europe. Next
Did you
to
see
Russia.
when the New York Times is questioning Candace Owen and where is she getting her information? Because the New York Times was trying to push this while the Ukraine invasion was happening. They were trying to push this thing that Ukraine is good and Russia is bad. And she was saying, well, this is one of the most corrupt countries on earth. So they said to her, like, where are you getting this information? They sent her an email, and she sent them back links to the New York Times and all these articles about how badly corrupt Ukraine was, which just makes me go, God damn. I can't trust the fucking New York Times to get it right. Like, you're supposed to be the paper of note. But a lot has changed, though. So Zelensky, the president, he got into office with 70% approval, and before the war, he had less than 30% approval. There was faction, there was division. The west side of Ukraine is pro, let's say, Ukrainian, and then the right side is pro Russia. So he got into office, and he had a high approval rating, and then before the war, it dropped very low.
Yeah, it had been dropping gradually over because of the division, because of the faction. He wasn't able to bring the country together. And the war, turns out, his great leadership was catalyzed, was made possible. Like, he was sometimes sort of a catastrophe brings out the best in us, and that was the case with him.
George W. Bush.
Yeah,
That's exactly what happened post 9/11.
yes. Yeah, exactly. But in his case, I wonder if he was able to hold that for a long time. Let's see what Zelensky does. But at the moment, Zelensky united a previously divided country, which is very difficult to do. So that's a historic event for Ukraine in its sovereign history. And so in terms of corruption, that might be a really big blow to corruption, that kind of unification. So I think there's a fundamental difference between the corruption in Ukraine and the corruption in Russia.
What is the conflict in Ukraine? Beside Russia, what is the internal conflict? The factions? What do they want? What is the dispute?
Well, no, it's just the factions that are vying for power. That's just at the basic level.
So it's basically like right versus left in America.
Yeah, but okay, so there's a bunch of differences. What they stand for, what they're looking for. A lot of it in recent years has been centered around the war with Russia, starting in 2014. And so some parts are Ukrainian speaking, pro-Ukraine. Some parts are Russian speaking, or primarily Russian speaking, and Russia. So on the east, you have the Donbass region around that as well. They want to be closer to Russia. And the west part wants to be closer to Europe, closer to NATO, closer to the European Union. That's one of the divisions. You want to be pro-democracy, or you want to be pro-whatever the heck Russia is. So it's like, are you pulling towards the west, the Western civilization, or are you pulling towards the east, the way of Russia, the way of China, the way of those superpowers?
I'm sure they're influenced, and they have the ones who are pro-Russia. They're getting some signals from Putin, or meeting with him. He's giving them indications that they would best be served to be aligned with him. It'd be better for them. And
Yeah, but he is still popular. He is still, I don't know exactly why he's popular, but there's a lot of nations to be the greatest nation on earth.
isn't there always just a longing for a strong man? Like this strong man leader.
I would say a strong vision, and that sometimes can coincide, or often does, with a strong man.
Isn't it like a natural inclination that people have to be led by a strong man? Like Putin, like him or hate him, think he's evil. That's all good, but there's no doubt that he's strong. He's a strong leader. I mean, he's been running Russia for a long time, and in the way he's been doing that, sort of unopposed, in a ruthless manner. It's very impressive. It's evil, but in terms of its efficacy, it's impressive what he's been able to do.
I think strength is one of the things we admire in leaders, but it's
Yeah.
not the entirety of it.
No.
So that's why Zelensky is extremely popular. He stepped up. The famous thing. He was Biden offered him a ride, and he said, "Fuck that. I'm staying put. Give me more bullets." And he stayed in Kiev, and held his ground where most leaders would have fled. This is the failure we had in Afghanistan, where we fled. Here's a leader that stepped up and held his ground, and that's rare in this world, and we admire that kind of strength. And the same could be said by the Russian people, the Indian people, the Chinese people that admire strength in Putin. But we also admire other values that make this country great, the United States of America. Is this kind of respect for human freedom, human rights, and sort of the embodiment of this ideal of like all men are created equal. That's not exactly communicated very clearly by Vladimir Putin.
Right.
That's
Privilege?
but there's also a difference between, and this again, the Oliver Stone perspective is between the messaging and the actual execution. Hitler's messaging was also very sort of beautiful sounding, right? What is he talking about? Sort of National Socialism, respect for workers,
Right.
like the downtrodden workers. That Germany is a great nation that deserves to be respected among other World War I. Okay, but like, are you also going to mention that you're going to murder and imprison and torture people, millions of people? You're not in the same things with America. Not moral equivalence at all, obviously. But we talk a lot about freedom. Well, what does freedom actually look like? You know, when we fight terrorism and evil in the world, what does that actually look like? Well, it turns out that it looks like you're bombing civilians, children, lose their fathers and mothers. Hundreds of thousands of people, civilians die when you're spreading freedom all over the world. So we have to be very careful, sort of separating the messaging from the actions, and we have to, as Americans, make sure we live up to the ideal, and we don't always. And I think when you just paint the world as black and white,
Yeah.
and instead of the full complexity of that, and that there's warmongers like that watch Ukraine now with the money that we're sending there, and they get excited because it can escalate, and if they escalate, they can get more and more money from manufacturing weapons to both sides, to all sides. And what if China enters with Taiwan? That tension, that military conflict, and there's nukes on the ready everywhere.
And not only that, there's hypersonic nukes. You know, this whole mutually assured destruction, and Mike Baker explained this to me from the CIA.
Yeah.
Mutually assured destruction is not on the table anymore. He goes, because with hypersonic weapons, they can attack so quickly we can't retaliate. So it's a matter of who pulls the trigger first.
Well, there's
If
so
you're
much
standing
secret
apart,
stuff.
If you're standing apart from a guy,
Yeah.
and you have a gun, and he has a gun, and you have your finger on the trigger, and he has his finger on the trigger, and you're like, you know what? I don't trust this guy. Boom. You pull that trigger, that guy's dead. There's no retaliating.
Yeah.
He's not going to retaliate. That's what he's saying. He's saying it's not like you have a gun and he has a gun and you are 700 yards away and you have a pistol and he's 700 yards away, so you're out of the effective range. And you say, you know what? I'm going to move in on this guy and I'm going to shoot him. But then he's going to shoot me. He's going to see me coming. He's going to shoot me and we're both going to die. That's mutual assured destruction. What he's saying is, no. You can launch this thing and it looks like it's going to hit Seattle and it takes a hard left turn and goes right into Chicago and there's not a damn thing you can do to stop it and you can't predict where it's going to go.
I think the American military-industrial complex is listening to this and is saying, hold my beer.
No, I'm sure they
Because
are, but if they
the
do
defense-
it too. But the thing is, Russia does have that.
But I am pretty sure Russia...
Yeah, we do too, but it doesn't matter. Once someone launches it,
No. American defense systems are
you think that they can stop that?
Yes.
They say they can.
Who says that?
Military experts.
I want to see their credentials and how much access they actually have, because people that comment on stuff. So just even with the limited access I've had, has spoken with a lot of people, Lockheed Martin and all over. I realize how much secrecy there is in terms of how many incredible weapon systems there are, given how much money is poured into these black ops. Just they think of them almost as toys. The way you love cars, they love incredible weapons. And it's almost, they take pride in making sure that America's high-tech military systems are better than anybody else in the world.
You know, that's what I think more and more that these UFOs are. I don't think that those things are from another world anymore. I've been watching these videos of these things where these fighter jets are getting scrambled to intercept these objects that are flying at insane speeds over the ocean. I'm like, why would we assume that those aren't just super fucking capable drones that we don't know exist yet?
We can have both.
We definitely can have both. We definitely can have both. I think both is on the table.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the shit we've been watching, like here's one. I've been thinking about this Commander David Fravor thing, this Tic Tac thing off of the coast of San. Why would he go there? Why would he go there? Well, that's where all the fucking military is. Why would he go there and be completely undetected and be operating in the middle of the ocean and be operating over what looks like something that's some sort of a submerged base? or some sort of a submerged vehicle that interacts with this drone that operates at insane rates of speed, like, wouldn't you, and it has active radar jamming, so it actively jams it. Why wouldn't we assume that that's ours?
Yeah, given how much secrecy there is in the American government and
Not
the
just
Chinese
that,
government.
but how much fake transparency there is from the Pentagon and from Congress where they're having meetings about UFOs. They need to inform the general public. Like they give a fuck about what we think. About anything. What benefit is there to inform the general public other than none?
Yeah, and I'm not sure how much politicians know. I feel like politicians is like the surface wave of an ocean. I feel like most of the work is done by people that are employed their whole life and working in the DoD, Department of Defense.
Deep state.
Yeah, I mean that term.
That term is beat up. But it's a real term.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, whatever that is. The state. What is the state? What is the government? And what is the government that is not elected and doesn't get removed from office every 4 years?
I think, doesn't the deep state imply there's a deep like corruption and manipulation of the populace to sort of like control, like a sort of conspiratorial like controlling the populace? The goal is to like for the people that are really in control to get richer and more powerful and that kind of stuff.
Doesn't that just come with the territory?
No, I don't think it does necessarily. I know.
You checked Nancy Pelosi's bank account?
I did. Me and her are very close. I like older women, you know.
She was hot when she was young.
Was she?
Yeah. I just found this.
Can't pull that up. Okay, never mind.
This is different. We'll get to that in a moment. I have to start drinking before we start talking about how hot Nancy Pelosi was. Googling underwater drone stuff, you know. And I found that looks like a sales video from 2016 showing a drone that could be launched and controlled from a submarine that's underwater. This was, you know, around the time of the Tic Tac thing, wasn't it? Yeah, Tic Tac was 2004. Sure, close enough. I mean, if this is something that they're talking about in 2016, they probably have the 18th iteration of the pile over there that is being controlled by us. I mean, what? How many? That's great. Yeah. So this is all CGI, right? Well, I mean, I believe that means they have been showing. I watched one drone, super fast drone that was hovering, and this was like something that they were just showing the capabilities of. It was hovering, and it goes. It just took off, and it was propeller driven, some sort of electrical propeller driven thing. It wasn't like a sort of combustion engine, but it was fucking insanely fast.
Yeah, take it. I've been working with drones recently too. Like robotics, just small experiments.
I know. I try to pretend that you're normal. I try to pretend that you're not actually working on artificial intelligence.
I stopped so much of that. Like I said, I've been at a really low point, like really low point. I'm sure up and down. These drones. But the drones are, you're talking about, I mean, I don't want to exaggerate, but very high speeds. It's like 40 miles an hour. And those are just
Not
like
40 miles an hour.
30, 40.
Not 40 miles an hour. It's slow. 40 miles an hour.
Tiny drone. That's very
No. These fucking things are way faster than that. Just
the
one.
agility. So just to be clear, this is you can navigate at that speed inside the building.
Oh, whoa. So small drones.
Yeah, like small.
Okay. This thing that I was looking at, it was so fast. It was hovering and it just went and took off. And I was watching this video of this thing. I mean, it took off really fast, like hundreds of miles an hour. And I'm watching this and I'm like, how do we know that that's not what these UFOs are? Like, why wouldn't we assume that one of these things would be considered a UFO? Because here it is hovering, right? So it's at a dead stop and then it just fucking bolts off at insane rates of speed.
Well, of course, you're talking about pilots observing this, and they say that this was beyond the realms of physics. So,
Right.
there could be like, I mean, I don't understand why there couldn't be just manipulation of the human eye, sort of hologram type of stuff.
Because it was detected on these machines. They recalibrated their machines to make sure that these things were accurate. What is this one? Let's see this. That's what I'm talking about.
That's different.
Come on,
That
son.
is wild.
Watch that. That's what I'm talking about. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I'm talking
I
about.
see.
That's not the
Fast.
video.
Yeah.
But watch this again.
Well,
0 to 120 miles an hour in 1 second, and then it comes back.
All right.
Is that fake?
No.
It looks fake.
I mean, I've got multiple videos. I just found a good one to show
Watch
you.
this again.
I feel
Look how fast it is. That looks like a
emasculated
UFO.
with my 30 miles an hour.
Yeah, when you were going 40 miles an hour, I thought he was going to say 40,000 miles an hour. You mean 40,000?
No, it just feels really fast. It feels really fast. Because when it's small, I don't know what that. When it's small, that speed is.
Yeah.
It's felt much more intensely.
Sure, because it's difficult to follow with the eye.
Yeah.
Where it's a large object going 120 miles an hour like a plane. Plane's going 500 miles an hour. It doesn't look like it's going fast at all.
Yeah.
This one goes 316 miles an hour.
Oh, yeah. See, that's what I'm talking about, man. These fucking things are fast as shit. So if you're looking at a small thing, if they make something that's the size of a frisbee and it's going 300 miles an hour, it's going to look preposterously fast. It's going to look like it's from another world.
And more they're being controlled by AI, which is great.
Yeah, great times. But it brings me back to when Bob Lazar, and I know he's a super controversial character that people immediately roll their eyes. I like him too. His discussions of that fusion engine, that whatever I don't know if you call it fusion. What is it with the element 115? I mean, whatever it is, the gravity defying or gravity manipulating drive that he said that sport craft had, which is this thing right here.
That's the thing?
Yeah, that's the model of it. Yeah.
Yeah, what about, he didn't say anything about his capabilities, he was just saying that's something he observed. Right?
Yeah, he didn't know the physical speed of it because they never figured out how to do it. All they figured out how to do it was to get it to move around a little bit. They never figured out how to get it to just like completely manipulate gravity. But he said the function, the way it does it, it manipulates gravity around it. The way he described it, he said, like putting an insanely heavy bowling ball in the middle of a mattress. So it pulls everything around it like that and bends space and time through its manipulation of gravity. And by doing that, it can go from one point to another point insanely fast. So like when Commander David Fravor described this vehicle that was more than 50,000 feet above sea level and went to 50 feet above sea level in less than a second. Like that kind of capability.
Yeah. Yeah.
If that's
By the way,
real.
I tried to ask around MIT, and there's no record of Bob Lazar ever being there.
No, I'll tell you why. I can't tell you why. We're going to edit this out. Okay, and we're back. See, that's why. But doesn't it make sense now?